to introduce our next speaker, who I think is, well, she definitely is my favourite person, absolutely, in Manchester. It's Lou Cordwell. She's the chair of the Greater Manchester Local Enterprise Partnership. Please welcome her to the stage.
Hi everyone. I feel like I'm just going to be a letdown now after that intro, so I'll manage everybody's expectations. But loads of new faces for me here today, which is always really nice. And so I'll perhaps start by introducing who I am and what I do, and assume I don't know anybody. So I've run a business here in Manchester that I started 22 years ago, because I am very old, called Magnetic North, and our business merged with an innovation studio last year, so we're now called Magnetic. So I've worked in tech, and we didn't call it innovation back then, but innovation, as we would now call it, and digital for a long time. And I've always been, I guess, really passionate about Manchester's opportunity in that space, and we worked all over the world before we started that business, and decided that given that we invented the computer, we should probably start a digital business here, and hoped that it would become the tech community that it has now. So as Sam said, I wear a number of other hats, having now begun to exit that business. I'm working in a startup, which I've just remembered how much I love those, and building an innovation district here in Manchester, which is really, really exciting. It's going to be called ID Manchester, 4.5 million square feet, just next to Piccadilly Station. So think King's Cross, but in the north, so therefore even better. And then in all of that, my kind of other hat is I chair something called the Greater Manchester LEP, which nobody knows what it is. My husband calls us lepers or lep dancers. So nobody knows what the LEP is. The LEP is basically the Local Enterprise Partnership. They were put in place quite a long time ago as part of the move to more devolved power across the UK, actually championed originally by Heseltine, for any of us who are old enough to remember those eras. And so the LEP works really closely with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority to steer the voice of business into conversations, and most importantly to steer the economic strategy. So we've had a really interesting time over the last 2 years. I took over as chair 2 years ago, the week we went into lockdown. So the half a day a month job that I thought became a 2-day-a-week job. And it's been, as everybody knows who runs a business in here or is working in business, an extraordinarily challenging time for business. However, as is the Manchester way, we also see in that enormous opportunity. So I'm going to talk a bit today about a thing called Innovation Greater Manchester that's come out of the LEP during that moment. And I guess the context to that is that we went into the pandemic and fairly quickly decided we were going to write an economic vision, which at a moment when most of our conversations were how do we get money quickly into those businesses tomorrow did seem like a slightly strange response to some people. But our view was we were going to do for the city region what we would do if we were a business, which is think about the shape of recovery we wanted on the other side of the pandemic, assuming that at some point there would be another side to that, albeit we thought it was going to be about 3 months, not 2 years. So we wrote an economic vision that effectively said we think there's an opportunity on the other side of this to learn from the moment and learn from what we were seeing. If Andy, our mayor, was here, he would talk about the tide going out and everything that we saw when the tide went out, and we didn't like a lot of what we saw. But the opportunity to drive growth, but to drive growth on the other side of this that took people and the planet with us. So we wrote an economic vision. You'll hear Andy talk about fairer, greener. But really what we're saying is we absolutely see a moment for Greater Manchester, but we don't want to, on the other side of this, just take any jobs and any kind of growth and anything that will help to recover the economy. We want to head in a specific direction that is true to our heritage, so true to that Manchester DNA that we've heard talked about a lot today, where we do care about people actually, and we do care about our communities, and we do want to behave as good employers and good businesses with long-term sustainable growth, but also recognises the kind of ultimate existential crisis that we have, which is the planet and the problems that we're facing internationally that can't be ignored now and have to be acted on in the next 10 years. So we launched that as our backdrop, and that enabled all of our economic decisions to start to frame in that way that thinks about, in business, what we'll call the triple bottom line in terms of the long-term impact. And within that, very quickly, it became clear that we obviously have, as a city region, have a really strong heritage in what we now call innovation, inventing things, being radical, having ideas, making stuff. But actually, the opportunity to put innovation at the heart of that vision and accelerate that growth and accelerate that ambition was really evident. So we launched a thing called Innovation Greater Manchester, which was a private sector-led initiative that began a conversation with government to say, actually, there's a disproportionately small amount of R&D spend that gets spent in the north and actually outside of the Golden Triangle. And if you're serious about levelling up, then you need to begin to transition some of that money up to the north and to the places that don't traditionally get it. That was about a 2.5-year journey before we finally saw earlier this year the Levelling Up white paper, which if you're a geek like me, a politics geek, some of you may have read, but the headlines of which are basically the government's commitment to levelling up, and within that recognition of that conversation that we've had around innovation and the announcement of Manchester and 2 other places, Glasgow and Birmingham, as what they're calling innovation accelerators. So we're now 2 or 3 months into that process of working with government to launch an innovation accelerator. And what that means is they've committed £100 million that's going to be split across 3 different cities. We'll arm wrestle a bit, no doubt, as to which city gets which check size, but we're in that process. And that's about funding our bigger idea of Innovation Greater Manchester, but to begin with, stimulating that with some projects. So if anybody hasn't seen it already, we've got a call for those ideas now out on the LEP website. People can submit ideas for funding that they believe are going to act as stimulus for the innovation economy. There's no specific sector, there's no specific scale of business, but we do want them to be business-led. Innovation Greater Manchester is a much bigger idea that takes a 10-year vision and says, actually, if we can create a connected ecosystem across all of the boroughs of Greater Manchester and connect our assets and our skills and our businesses and our academic institutions together to drive innovation, that's the future of our economy. And actually, we know we've got a job to do, not just to level up across the country, but to level up across Greater Manchester. So yeah, that's Innovation Greater Manchester. Thanks for giving me a platform, Sam, to talk about it. If anybody's interested and wants to connect with me, we welcome all businesses to be involved in it. And like I said, we've got a live call for ideas out there now and really would encourage people to get involved. So thank you and nice to meet everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Lou. And Lou has said that she can stay around just for a couple of minutes because